All right, folks. So sorry about that delay. We just had some challenges with the Teams client and stuff. And hey, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your well-deserved weekend and joining to be with us today. So today, myself, Vignesh Ganeshan, and Samik Roy. So we both will be talking about how to get started with Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. Now, this is, I think it's about the 10th or 11th session on the Microsoft Defender XDR webinar series. We started off this journey sometime I think on February, and we managed to cover the Defender for Office 365, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, and today we will be talking about Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. Now, of course, this is a big product, meaning it has a lot that it has to offer. So today on this ready session, we'll be focusing on just one key feature, which is the cloud discovery. That's what we want to talk about. So with that, let me get started. So my name is Vignesh Ganeshan. I work as an enterprise architect. I'm also a Microsoft MVP and MCT. And with that, let me hand it over to my co-speaker, Samik, to introduce himself. Samik, over to you. Samik, you're on mute. Samik, you're on mute. So, or else I'll just keep starting. Samik, you're still on mute. So um, let me go ahead and introduce Samik. So Samik Roy, so he works as a senior cloud security architect. He's also a Microsoft MVP and MCT. So we both will be, taking care of this ready session for you folks today. All right. So what's the agenda? So we have a pretty crisp agenda today. We want to talk about what is Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps and why should any organization care about this in the first place, right? And then we'll talk about licensing, because licensing is one complex topic when it comes to the Microsoft Cloud services, right? And I often joked about this because I haven't had the opportunity to meet at least one single human being in my lifetime who understands Microsoft licensing clearly well, right? So because that's how complex it is, right? And then we'll be talking about how to get started with Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. We'll talk about what is it and how to get started with that. Then, as I said, Cloud App Discovery is one such important feature or capability in Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. So we'll talk about Cloud App Discovery. And then we'll have Samik will be doing a demo, and then we'll take up the questions. Okay, so before we even talk about the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, let's talk about what is a CASB, right? Because Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, it's nothing but it's Microsoft's CASB. And by CASB, I mean Cloud Access Security Broker. So CASB is the short form for that. So what is it? What do we mean by CASB, right? So this is a term which was coined by Gartner sometime in 2011. But back then, not a lot of organizations were really using it, right? I think it really gained a lot of attention somewhere around, let's say, post 2015 or 2018-ish. So my very first, the first time I got to, play around with the CASB was sometime in 2017 or 2018, right? Of course, the product did exist before that, but that was the time when I had an opportunity to go out and play around with that. And the first CASB which I had an opportunity to work with was Oracle CASB. The product is still around, it's great. And then onwards, I started to work on multiple other CASBs, but Microsoft has always been my favorite CASB. So Microsoft's CASB is called as Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. So as you can see in the diagram, a CASB is nothing but it's something which sits between your organization users and the other cloud apps. Now, what do I mean by that, right? If you look at the enterprise, there are a lot of cloud apps which are going to be used. Think about Microsoft 365, think about Google Workspace, think about Slack. There are about thousands and thousands of applications which will be used in your organization, right? Not everybody would be using it, but different teams based on their work profile and based upon whatever they have to do, they'll be using different cloud solutions, right? Some could be using Workday, then there's just a lot. I just can't keep telling names because, there's just so much out there. And these cloud services, so these cloud apps, they're hosted somewhere and you're sitting in your organization within your corporate network and stuff, and you're trying to access it. Or maybe you're sitting somewhere from your home, just directly trying to access it through your internet, right? Or maybe you're connected through your VPN or you're going through your corporate firewall and stuff, right? So how does one make sure that, or what is make sure that whatever you're trying to do is governed and secured in a proper manner, right? Because everything happens on the cloud. There should be some way that you can go ahead and make sure that you're enforcing proper security policies. You're trying to secure things. You're trying to govern things. You want to make sure that people are not exploiting the solution. They are making proper use of whatever cloud apps is given to them, right? And you also want to make sure that you have a proper bird's eye view on what's happening in your enterprise. What are the different apps which people are using? Are they even allowed to use it in the first place? For instance, I often pick up on WhatsApp. For the life of me, I haven't seen any organization, at least I personally haven't come across any organization which said WhatsApp is an approved app. You can go ahead and store or share, your corporate documents or any confidential documents on WhatsApp, right? But still, you would see a lot of us, even we ourselves, if you want to be honest to ourselves, we ourselves have done these things, right? We shared some important information about work related stuff or some documents in WhatsApp, right? So how do I make sure that I govern all this? How do I make sure that people make proper use of the applications that are given to them and they do not use something which is not given to them by their IT team? So this is where cloud access security poker comes into picture, right? So as I said, it could do a lot. So one is trying to understand shadow IT. The next thing is making sure that whatever cloud apps you have given, people are using it the way it is supposed to be used. They're not exploiting it, right? And also, if at all you want to make sure that there are some proper restrictions or information protection policies, so on and so forth, right? So everything can be done using a cloud access security broker. I'm just trying to tell a little, but there is a lot that this solution has to offer. And maybe in the upcoming sessions, we'll be talking a lot about this. So that let's keep moving on. So as I said, Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps is nothing but Microsoft's CASB. So this product was called as, it had different names. It was called as Microsoft Cloud App Security before, and now it's called as Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. And the other thing to notice is this is not a native Microsoft product. So back in, I believe, 2018 or sometime, or 2018 or 2015, I'm not sure. I don't really remember the exact year off the top of my head. Microsoft acquired a company called as Adalom. So Adalom was a CASB company. They acquired that, and then they brought in other Microsoft integrations also, like with Purview and other things which came in, and then they formed this product called as Microsoft Cloud App Security, which is now called as Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. So if you want to know the history about Defender for Cloud Apps, I would recommend just go ahead and Google Microsoft Adalom, Adallom, right? Adalom acquisition. You can read about that organization and you can read about the acquisition which Microsoft made. And today the product is what it is today. So what is Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps offer to us, right? So these are the core thing it does. So one is discovering the SaaS applications. As I said, all the SaaS applications which are being used in your organization by your users, right? If you want to do a discovery of it, your CASB can do that for you. The next thing is SaaS security posture management. Now, let's say you have rolled out a lot of SaaS solutions, right? How do I make sure that the security posture management is taken care of, right? Are there any misconfigurations, right? Have I made sure that I've configured things in the right manner, right? So that's where a CASB comes in handy. And also then the information protection. Of course, as I said, a lot of these applications are going to be used for sharing resources, right? It could be a lot of confidential resources, documents, customer confidential information, IPs. There's just so much which is happening out there, right? How do we make sure that there are proper information protection policies and control, right? How do we make sure that people are sharing it in the right way and people, they're not exploiting the platform. Next thing is continuous set protection. So whatever is happening should be continuous, right? It should be on the go, on the fly. You cannot wait for something to then happen and then the application goes and detects it and then says that, hey, this has happened, right? By then already enough damage is done. So whatever happens should be, instant. It should be able to detect it as soon as possible and block it. And then finally, app to app protection. It so happens that in organizations, right, and you as a IT admin itself would have done it, right? Often at times you would get this request saying that, hey, can you go ahead and register this application in your infra app registration? Now, this application needs to have access to SharePoint, right? Because it wants to read something, right? And then maybe one more fancy application which comes in and says that, okay, register this. Now, this application needs to have access on all the users' mailboxes, right? Well, first of all, something like that shouldn't happen. But even let's say you got all the, all the approvals and stuff, and you gave that particular permissions, right? But have we ever done a good job in going and looking back at those permissions and removing it? We normally wouldn't do that, right? Maybe that was just for a POC, or maybe that was just for a limited amount of time, but then we just leave it there and those permissions live there forever. So it simply means another application is having access to your SharePoint resources or to your user's mailbox through an API, right? Which is not really a good thing to have. So that's where the app governance or the app to app protection piece comes in. So it sort of gives you a complete view on what are such permissions which are there in your organization. As I said, as we start talking about each and every single feature or capability, you'll understand more about this. But today our core focus is going to be on the discovery of SaaS applications, which is called as cloud discovery. Okay, now SKUs, right? So one thing which I want to tell you, upfront is there is something called as Office 365 Cloud App Security. Then there is something called as Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, right? So now your Office 365 Cloud App Security is nothing but it's a subset of Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. It's if I want to just make it simple, your Office 365 Cloud App Security is specifically only meant for the Office 365 apps, okay? But your Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps is meant for a lot of other SaaS solutions. It's just not meant for Microsoft 365 is the primary one, but it can take care of other SaaS solutions also, Dropbox, Google, and there are about 33K apps out there which it can look into. All right, so in terms of licensing, when it comes to the Microsoft 365 Cloud App Security, these are the different SKUs which gives you the capability to have, Microsoft 365 Cloud App Security. And for Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, these are the SKUs. I'm not gonna go ahead and read through each and every single SKU. Later, when the slides are made available, or maybe later when you're going through the recording, you can see it for yourself. And then also for the app governance piece, which I just spoke about, right? These are the different SKUs which offer that. Now, if you as an organization, if you're only interested on Microsoft 365 Cloud App Security, good enough, right? You can just go ahead and just purchase those SKUs which give you that, or the add-ons. Or maybe you're interested on the complete Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps capability, then you can look at the second column. So those are the SKUs. And let me also remind you that the data that you see here, this keeps changing frequently because Microsoft keeps changing their licensing standards and stuff quite often. So whatever you see here may hold good for let's say for 6 months or 3 months from now, and then things might change. So always please make sure that you go back to the Microsoft documentation, or you talk to your Microsoft representative, whomever you've been working with, right? It could be your TAM, it could be your account specialist, it could be your SSP or whomever, right? And make sure that you get the up-to-date information on the licensing. So before we get started with Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, there are a couple of things that you need to make sure that you have to take care in your environment, right? So the very first one is network requirements. There is a good Microsoft documentation on this. I think today, pretty much most of the organizations, as long as you're working from home, it's through internet. But then you're going to office. I'm just carefully using the word most because not every organization is keeping things that way, right? There are a lot of, let's say, financial organizations, healthcare, a lot of highly restrictive, organizations where they still work within a confined network, right? So if at all you're planning to use Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, now these are the different let's say URLs that you might have to whitelist in your firewall, or else if you're still doing the IP address stuff, right? So then these are the different URLs that you need to whitelist, right? So Microsoft they constantly keep updating this, right? Based upon whichever device that you're using, right? If it is just URL based thing, then you can just go ahead and whitelist all these URLs. But if you're still doing things with the IP address, then these are the IPs that you might need to add. And sometimes they keep changing these IPs, right? Once in a month or once in a few months. So always please make sure that you come here and check this and keep adding the right IPs and removing the ones which Microsoft has removed. But this information is out there for you to go ahead and view. Now, in terms of permissions, right? What permission should one have to go ahead and play around with Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. So it is the security administrator role. You must at least be having security administrator role so that you can go ahead and start looking at things, start configuring things, start applying policies, pretty much go around and do everything in Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. So that's the least permissions that you need to have. Okay. Now, coming back to our slide. So in terms of initial configuration, so how to get started with this. So I'll just quickly talk about this, but Samik is going to talk in detail about this, right? So I'm here, I'm just going to go to my security admin center. I would land in the Microsoft Defender XDR page. Just give it a minute. So here we are. So system settings. So the settings that you see here is common for all the Microsoft Defender XDR services, right? You talk about Defender for Office 365, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, or Defender for Cloud Apps. Everything is here. You come, click on settings and choose the one that is appropriate for you. Click on Cloud Apps, right? And there are a lot of settings and options which are given to you, right? So you need to make sure that you're configuring things appropriately, whatever best suits you based upon your need, based upon your business need, based upon what works for your customer, their environment and stuff. This is where all the settings comes into picture. And Samik would be walking you through each and every single one of these. But I said, so today our core focus is the cloud discovery. So we'll be talking about the system settings and the settings which are specific only to cloud discovery, right? And then we also have something called as this is the cloud apps, then the cloud. So whatever settings you're configuring here, based upon that is what the data will start showing up on the cloud discovery dashboard. So this is also something which Samik will be walking you through in about a few minutes. So what is this cloud discovery thing which I've been talking about, or which I've been saying for quite a few times now, right? So as the name itself says, cloud app discovery, right? Using Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, one of the core functionality of Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps is trying to perform a cloud app discovery, meaning you want to understand what are the different cloud apps that your users are using in your environment, right? And are these apps the right ones? Are they using only the ones which the IT team has given them, or they're trying to use something which the IT team hasn't approved, right? For instance, WhatsApp, which I mentioned, right? So this is what you can do using Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. And there is something called as a catalog, which means Microsoft maintains a catalog, so they can discover up to 33,000 cloud apps. This is already there in their catalog, right? And then you can also go ahead and give a rating for each app based upon the risk factors and stuff. You can block a certain app. You can see whether the compliance requirements are met for a certain app. There's just so much that you can do that. So I don't want to steal Samik's thunder, so I'll just leave it to him. So Samik, over to you now for the demo.
Thank you, Vignesh. Hope I'm audible.
Yeah, you're audible now.
All right, give me 1 second. And I'd like to share my screen. And my screen should be visible to everyone now.
Not yet. Coming up.
All
Yes,
right.
we see your wallpaper now.
Yeah, so basically I'll just bring up the screen here
Yep,
and
you're good to go.
let me, yeah, let me cancel this. And first of all, as Vignesh was talking about, right, that we had to do some settings first before it gets started, right? So for that, we would go to settings, and obviously before that, the URL, just a reminder, it's security.microsoft.com/cloud apps. That's where we are. Go to settings, and under settings, we go to cloud apps. This is where we are going to see all the settings here. Now, in the left-hand side, the first one was basically talking about, yeah, talking about fundamentally all details around the cloud app instance, right? And apart from that, what's going to happen is once we log in here, right? Uh, we should be able to see the fundamental details and okay. And then this has like where the data center and technically it is where your tenant ID is and your specific API you want. Now going to the next one, organization settings. This is where you're going to see the display name in case you want to change it. Generally this stuff doesn't happen, but in case you have used different organizations or different environment name, you can add it. Want to add a logo or what domains to be managed here. Uh, all right, now it should be good. Basically, yeah. Then you can add all the domains what to be managed here, and from there, that's a setting you could be able to do it here, right? Then the next one is mail settings. So that's basically to look at any mails you want to send a test mail, or for example, any mail comes here, right? All these details, and you should be able to see different cloud apps and what is the email address and things like that. In case you want to send a test mail, you can send it, or you can upload a template. Basically, you can also look at what kind of template to be shared as an email from here, right? Next one is scope deployment and privacy. So this is again another important settings wherein you can add a rule to include, exclude, or activity privacy. Because what we do is, let me try to add rule here, and we can just say demo rule. I'm not gonna create it, but you can see, basically right now there are two things created in Friday and Azure, right? That's why you see all the specific groups to be scoped, and either you can make the rule to include this for all the apps or selected app, or even within the app, selected app instances, right? That's where you see. So this is mostly around scoping the policies, and this settings is provided just to ensure that you are able to scope the policy or setting for a particular set of users before even you actually, you know, before even you actually enroll it to everybody in the organization, right? That's about the settings. Same way, the way we have shown inclusion, you can do exclusion as well. And the further is activity privacy. What kind of activity? So if I want to add a group here, let me add a group, and that's where you can add the user's activity privacy here, right? The next one is IP ranges, right? If I look at, I would see by default there is a good lot of IP ranges which are added as a allowed IP ranges and things like that. And there are cases dynamic. If you want to add IP ranges, for example, this can be used later also in the policy implementation. But for example, if I want to say office IP address, right? And then you can give a range, you can give a category for what they are VPN, they're cloud providers, right? And then you can tag them as well. And then you can override location or override registered ISP, just to make sure that if you are having your own VNet or own VPN and things like that, right? So this is all as a part of settings itself. The next thing I'd go for is user groups. And user groups are basically nothing but whatever applications we have onboarded to cloud apps, right? So in this case, we have technically onboarded Azure and Office 365, and that's where we are able to see all those groups. But if you want to import, you can just select a group. Let's say I go for Enter ID, and then I can also add another group. By default, something has appeared, but let's say if we want to import a group, and the purpose of importing a user group is in case you want to apply a policy in future to a particular group or apply some settings, yeah, you can do that. As you can see, all those details from that Entra tenant is available. So now if I go to Azure, it will also list down, there's nothing to show because this Azure instance has do not have any group we imported here. Similarly, once you add custom apps, you should be able to select them and then select all the group and import them. The purpose of import is basically to get all those users or all those identities synchronized within MCAS so that you can apply the policies, right? The next settings would be basically API tokens, wherein obviously in case you are wanting to export any data or even details over here, right? So I would say let's add a token here, and I would generate. So that's going to generate an API token, and then this is where the URLs technically you can create a REST API call or write any other script to extract data to your third-party system. Let's say, for example, your ticketing system or any other system or your data warehouse account export it, right? Let me cancel this. And then the next one is basically the SIEM agents. Now, obviously, there's nothing here, but if you want to add a SIEM agent, you can add a generic science agent, wherein you can integrate with your generic SIEM server, and then it's obviously wizard when we go through and technically what is the agent name and what kind of uh, settings you want to do from there. That's how you go from here. Apart from that, you want to do it Sentinel. Obviously, I'd apply to all and all data. If you want to apply filters, you can also apply that. Uh, what this does, right? If I go to Defender Management Point, for example, what this does, this enables you to send your MCAS log to SIEM, which is another integration and better, again, another single pane of glass where you see your entire environment data, either it's Microsoft, non-Microsoft, and things like that. Again, there's different way to do it also from Sentinel itself, but this is where the settings which we can do from Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. So let me quit it for now. Then we have playbooks. So whenever you're talking about CASB as a SaaS here, right, or as an offering from Microsoft, what we do is there will be things which we are kind of looking at it, and at times we might want to take some actions, right? And then eventually those actions were flow in remediation or user enrichment or any sort of generic enrichment. For that we can add flows. So if I add flow, that's going to open up a new tab, and you can say you can make a Power Automate flow basically, right, to come back and act on top of that, right? Coming back to the next one, it's my email notification section. That's where you can specify, do you want to receive notification for what kind of alerts, right? And all these categories are available, what kind of settings you want to do. You can also receive notification from Defender Cloud Apps system alerts as well, which is basically something happen within Cloud Apps, you will also receive an email, right? And obviously this settings, as Vignesh said, this appears depending on you have the right permission. So it's not that everybody in the organization can go and set an alert. It basically you can specify, as an admin, do you want to do it or not? So whatever we have spoken so far, those are basically nothing but generic or system settings with my account. The next thing we are going to look at is cloud discovery specific settings, so how the discovery happens. And the first one within that is score metrics. Now, if you look at the score metrics, right, how basically important is given to actual cloud apps or any other SaaS apps, there are pretty different metrics, and I would like to really go a little slow here and walk you through all the settings here. Now, there are two threshold settings you can do. For example, if I want to do category, category importance, and you can change it as a whole here itself, right? Medium two and things like that. Or you can change the threshold specifically, for years founded, holding, domain registration, consumer popularity, the disaster recovery plan. So you can see, when it try to discover an apps, right? What are the parameter it kind of checks as part of general itself, these fields. Now, there is also cases, let's say, whenever you have apps, let's say WhatsApp, for example, or maybe any other app, Signal, for example, right? Which is used predominantly as a messaging app, wherein you can actually say that any value should be included, and then if there is a negative contribution to the score. So if it is included, then there'll be impact on the score of that. And eventually we'll see how the score is calculated. And I get, by Microsoft, the scoring system done depending on the threshold settings you do here, right? Um, Now, the next thing is security. Obviously, this makes sense, and we have the similar kind of settings here. Number one is you can do a whole specific settings wherein you can change it to medium to high and things like that. Or you can look at specific field, specific data. Let's say you talk about Salesforce, right? Or you talk about WhatsApp itself. Data at rest encryption method, is it available, right? How to measure it, what is the importance of it? That's a medium importance. By default everything is medium so that things can be balanced when the score is calculated. But you, if you want to comply to specific standard, or your organization has a specific, very specific need to understand what things are available, you can actually tweak them, right? Same thing goes for multi-factor authentication, because a lot of cases we expect multi-factor authentication to be a very, 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 very mandate thing, right? Same thing goes for IP address restriction. We need to check that if the things are IP restricted or not, right? Next thing is user audit trail. Does that app support user audit trail so that it can be tracked, and MCAS can actually calculate and capture that? Second thing is admin audit trail. So there's a little difference between user and admin. The difference is like, right now what I'm doing is basically an admin activity, so that log trail will be for admin activity. But once we apply a policy or we onboard some apps into MCAS, the impact end happens to end user, and the usage done by end user, those are user audit logs. And then data audit trail, what happens to the data, what happens to the data flow, then the data classification, if that is excluded or included, data at rest encryption, right? You go up, right? Data at rest encryption method and data at rest encryption. What is the method? User role support. That means, is it like generic application? Let's say again, I'll quote WhatsApp here, right? Technically, WhatsApp is like you send a message. There's no much of administration there, and there's no role specification, right? Um, then there is a verified certificate name. There is a trusted certificate name, right? And then there's an encryption protocol. What is the one? For example, TLS is very well known one. If it is supported or unsupported, heartbeat pledged, something like specific to SL itself, right? Then the next part is within the HTTP, right? So what are the headers basically implemented? Does it support SAML base so that it can be implemented as a SSO or not? Then enforce data transfer encryption, right? That's possible or not? And then protect drone, that specific type of attacks, what you would see, right? Drone attacks are basically nothing very simple. That's also kind of tested. Penetration testing, does this app carry out penetration testing for network vulnerabilities? That's also a check being done, right? Then the last one is, does it require unique authentication, or I'd say use authentication? And then does it have a password policy? Now, if you look at within security itself, right, there is a lot of settings which are available to be applied, and these can be tweaked. Now, majorly organizations don't look into this core metrics because you have the flexibility to tune it, right? How your scoring should be done. And then we have looked at general, we have looked at security. Now the second and third part is compliance, right? Now in the compliance settings, what we are seeing here is what kind of compliance. And again, the same setting applies here. You can see, these are very generic, or majorly major compliance one, like ISO 20001, compliance, GAP, FISMA, FINRA, and ITAR, all these SOC 1, SOC 2. So basically, you can look at, you name it, mostly you get all the compliance standards. So even if you look at that, the list is really humongous. So and it basically goes on, right? So technically, this is where you can actually look at your general settings, your security settings, and compliance settings. Then the last part is legal, right? So, for example, if you're sending something in any app, who owns it? What is the legal ownership? What is the data ownership? Is it the app provider, or is it the consumer? Is it somebody else, and things like that, right? Specifically, let's say GDPR, right? GDPR is also something which is very, very important at cases like, if you want to get your data right to erase, right? Does it have that or not? Or there are reports being sent, or there are reports being done for data protection and things like that. So you can see, by default, everything is medium so that things can be normalized, or it carries, every settings here carries equal weightage. But in case you are coming from compliance background, you're coming from security background, depending on, or your organization has a specific need, right? You can overall tweak that for entire dependent of cloud app settings, right? And then obviously, if you by mistake accidentally, you always have reset to default option, which will be reset again also medium, right? That's what about score metrics is, right? Just a quick thing, in case you have any questions, feel free to paste it in the chat. With that said, I will just move on to the next section, which is snapshot report. Now, as you can see, there is one report being processed here, like with sample zscaler log. What does this mean? This means actually that let's say you have provisioned, Defender for cloud apps, and you have your firewall data with you. And what happens is you want to look at a snapshot report when you ingest your firewall data to cloud apps, how basically they are, they're going to get captured, right? That's one of the things I would say you can actually look at from this perspective itself, right? Now, for that to happen, all you need to do is you will collect the data from your particular firewall or from a particular network devices. And if you are very new to it, the way is create a snapshot report, right? And then obviously it says, kind of report is being processed. So let me just delete it for now. So you can create a new one. Let me delete this. Obviously, it takes up to 24 hours and there's limited numbers. So now it's clear. Create a snapshot report. I will go to next. And let's say I will say sample network log report. And then I'll give the same description, though it's not mandatory, but let's keep it in the lines, in appliances, right? You can see there is a really ample number of lists. I would really like to go slow, but just for the interest of time, there's really a full lot of things. For example, I go to Juniper SRX, right? And then the good part is, let's say, even if you're new here, right? Microsoft gives us a reference, like what kind of data set to be included here. So if I scroll down a little bit, as you can see, either you can get it from syslog or you can see from FTP, whatever, like depending on what kind of system you have access to, and you can extract the data in that format. This is where the settings you can download a sample log and things like that. Now, in case you are having a little different setup than the normal one, you want to do some customization. There's also an option. If you scroll all the way to bottom, it says custom log format. Then you can ingest your same log format either in CSV or in key value pair. Then you give a parser name. So basically, a new parser is created in custom logs to parse your network logs. So I would say custom parser, right? And then select a delimiter. If it is a CSV, obviously you go with a comma, but even cases are there. You can have tabs, semicolon, space, pipe, right? And then choose custom header if you want to. Then timestamp. You got to give the name of the timestamp column and what kind of format. As you can see, these are like pretty well-defined format available here, which you can actually select from depending on what kind of format you're maintaining, right? Or you can say contains syslog timestamp, which is basically a syslog specific timestamp, right? That's mmddhh colon colon ss, right? Then if you want to do date time format, right, you can change it, and then you can again go for a different column. If you're using a different column of date and time, you can change the column name, and same thing goes for syslog kind of timestamp here. Stick back to the time format. Now you also got to select the source IP column name, the destination IP column name, destination URL column name, and also you have a selection, right? Mostly these are two generic format, right? I would say three format, which is one is dot at the end, one without dot, and the middle one is request method, right? That's how it goes. Then in case you have a username format, in username format, you can say corporate alias, display name, email, whatever is applicable, right? It totally depend on your kind of environment here or other, right? Then traffic is what? Out, in, example for int, example for bytes. So basically this is where you can entirely create a parser for your custom firewall logs if you've customized it, or if you have a specific product which is not listed here. And then the action, right? Action, and specifically action column name and your deny term, right? And then once you do it, you save it, and then it will ask you to upload a CSV, or maybe like the limiter one what you have selected on top, right? There's another one, key value stuff. And then once we save it, it basically uploads here, and that's where, and up to Microsoft says that what you could do is go to next. Let me get to something very, just to show you, right? You go to next, you upload a log, and when you do that, it says there's a limitation. Your log data should not be, more than 90 days older, and it should not be more than 1 GB in size, because that's what the expected max size. Obviously you can do it in smaller sizes, but generally firewall log sizes tend to grow more and more over time for production scenarios. Then I would say quit here, and imagine that you're doing it and you really have a good amount of data. You'd see a sample snapshot report, something like this, right? I'm also going to show you the kind of data set here right now, but it gives you a holistic view from the log file I've ingested, right? So let me close that for now. That was the snapshot report, which you can do it from, piece of your network logs collected within your organization. And then continuous report is something you can create a continuous report by connecting your appliances and things like that. And then you can also go for automatic log upload. You can add a data source. If I go and add a data source, it'll ask what kind of appliances you want to. The same settings, but here it's the receiver type is different. You are ingesting to syslog, you're ingesting to FTPS or ADP, TCP, whatever, and then cancel it. Uh, in the log collectors, obviously you can add a log collector, which is this log server. Technically, you can add a log collector, say the data sources and create it, right? That's where you would see, how to get an automatic log upload. Now, if you look at that data sources, right, by default, you would see Defender managed endpoint. That means we are already environment, and there are endpoint devices, right, uh, which are managed. So there's already data source added. So the data collection is already in place. For example, we have a few devices running in the environment, right? And then after that being executed, data is being collected. That's what, and I'm going to show you in a while that where that data comes from and how basically that data is actually shown. The next settings will be app tags, right? And then there are 3 app tags by default. You can create one. You can also create scope profiles. Scope profiles is, again, you want to apply a tag on specific scope profile. In our case, we have created demo profile wherein we have added device group for Defender, and that's how it goes, right? And then coming to the app tags, sanctioned, unsanctioned, and monitored. Again, you want the app tag for a particular use for your organization, you can go ahead and this create it, right? So I'd say cancel it for now. Exclude entities, that's the settings which is mostly useful for, I'd say, whitelisting. You can exclude users, you can exclude group, you can exclude IP addresses, and you can exclude devices, right? Now, if I go to exclude users, I'm going to add one and select a user to exclude. It's going to list down all the users already excluded here, already imported here. There's nothing imported, that's why you don't see here. Let me go to excluded devices, and I would say try to add one. You see there's one PC actually running right now in the environment, so I can see that, right? And I can exclude that as a part of cloud discovery. So cloud discovery will stop exclusion, all these rules and detection. The next setting is really important settings, and this exactly talks about how a good Microsoft license, for example E5, can be beneficial for your organization in a more better way. Now, enforce ACK access. For example, you have devices in your organization which are controlled or which are under the purview of Defender, right? Defender for endpoint. You can enforce app access. That means what apps can be accessed, what apps cannot be accessed within the device. So technically, you can control all those details within the endpoint and with your own control from Cloud Apps itself. For example, enforce app access. This will do, for example, if I come here and then we have Defender enrolled devices wherein, and in the cloud app we have also tagged certain things which are like unsanctioned apps, right? And then you can actually look at unsanctioned app from here, and once you mark it as unsanctioned, and then it basically gets blocked. Technically user is not able to access in the endpoint, right? Right. So let me go to the next one here. And obviously, once we do that, and the alerts, alert high. what kind of alert you want to create if that somebody signals into, if that is being accessed in your endpoint or things like that. And then you can also do a notification URL. So hi and notification URL, and then if you want to do a notification URL for blocked apps and things like that, right? And then the next one is user enrichment. If you want to do your user, for example, in Defender for Cloud Apps, you have a user imported, right? That comes in, and then after that, you have enrich discovered. You want to enrich discovered user identities for Microsoft Entra ID usernames, enabling your upload. It might cause you duplication, but there might be users which are not enriched here, right? You can get more information around Entra ID and then get that enrichment done here. And then last thing is, at cases, want to anonymize your data, right? Uh, by default, if you want to anonymize with the new reports or any reports, it has to appear, or you want to anonymize a device name. This might be relevant at cases. This might not be relevant because at times, if you want to protect, yes, this might be useful. But in case, let's say, you want to investigate something, right? Really dig down the user, then you will not be able to do that, right? That's how the anonymization works here. Then the last one is deletion of data, right? Obviously, in case you want to do a hard reset, right? As you see, delete all this tenants cloud discovery data. This action cannot be undone. So obviously, once you do it, right, then it cannot be like all the data is gone. So technically, you are just wiping out all your MCAS data from MCAS itself, right? The next section of the things we'll definitely try to cover in our next session. There are quite a few around connected apps, information protection, conditional access control, and app governance. But so far we have talked about the settings. Once the settings are in, right, we would like to jump into the cloud discovery under cloud apps, the first option. So when I go there, as I was talking about creating new reports, right, uh, then you can see by default, okay, I think there's a chat here. I think there's a question. I'd like to take a pause and see the question. Give me one quick second. If you configure an alert CVID, let's say as medium, will TI classify same alert as? Yes, yes. Obviously, if you categorize that as a medium severity, it will classify that. It will not be TI. It's basically the. So now there are two things. If you whatever conditions you're putting, there is one thing called condition. Once you configure that as a medium severity, the alert you get, yes, it's a medium severity one, right? That's uh, that's how it should be, right? Hope that answers. In case you have any other question, feel free to paste in the chat. All right. Now, the next thing is, as I say, like cloud discovery, right? Uh, as you see by default, we are in a cloud discovery dashboard. It has on top, if you see, it has Defender managed endpoint. So technically, the default data set will be any Defender endpoint, which is from Defender endpoint, right? Which is coming from all the Defender endpoint enrolled here, right? Uh, apart from that, what happens here is, in case you have a snapshot report uploaded from a firewall report, or you have the continuous reports, anything you have configured, you'll also have an option to switch here and look at that. And you can also create a snapshot report from here, right? Now, looking at this, as I said, this is a dashboard, right? There are 13 apps, and this is a result of all the data we have been, utilizing or accessing all the data points from the endpoint configured here, right? You can see 13 apps, one IP address, one user, one device, and this is the traffic. And here's the background kind of type of apps, basically unsanctioned and sanctioned, both being accessed, right? And then the risk level, right? Obviously, all categories are default. If you want to change it to any other category specific to risk level, yeah, you can do that. And it's by app, it's by traffic, it's by upload, it's by transaction, it's by devices. discovered discovered app, and then view apps, discovered app and categories, and then traffic, right? You can filter it by categories, filter it by traffic, right? And these are the discovered apps. Basically, these are the things wherein actually captured by the endpoint device, whatever we have access for, right? And then the right-hand side were the top entities who have used it, right? These are the users, and the demo PC is in our case who has accessed what kind of data, right? What is the device has accessed and the user has accessed. Obviously, for any case, can be very specific on the data, right? And then obviously, as we just doing a quick reference back that we talked about headquarters selection, right? We need to check the not date on that. You can actually look at the details available here, right? It's all on US based apps, right? Now, if you want to go deeper, right, you can always go with discovered apps. You can always, it's basically a snapshot of all the discovered apps, whatever is found. And I'll let it load for a moment. And you can see there are apps which are basically identified and discovered based on the accessibility or usability on that endpoint managed devices by any user. Discovered resources, yeah, you might see a few depending on what's being accessed right now. But again, for the interest of time, I'll just quickly go to IP address. IP address is the one wherein, as you can see, the total traffic done with IP addresses and the users. And then there are two users, as I say. One is the tenant user, and one is we are using a local account to log into the PC. That's why you see two users, and we'll obviously see one devices here, which is the managed device, right? I'll let it load. So with that said, I think this is where we can look at the cloud discovery. And the next one is obviously, which will again repeat in our next session, but cloud app catalog, as Bignesh was saying, right? So in case, and this will be listed as like 33,904 to be precise apps available to be discovered by Microsoft already. And you can apply certain unsanctioned so that it can be blocked or it can be in that point. And you can look at all the list of apps and you can do a search from here, right? So that's about the settings and the cloud discovery and basically the getting started with app catalog around the demo. Now I will just open up to you for any questions you have. All right, so there's a great question. How will cloud discovery handle the cloud apps I'm using at home? I mean, the apps are non-corporate apps. So, see, basically there are things to look at shadow IT. So let's take a scenario you're working from home, right? So that means your device is covered by Defender for Endpoint. Now, once you have Defender for Endpoint covered here, if you look at in our instance, I would go to cloud discovery again for this device. Let's assume this is home device which we have been using, and then we can look at discovered resources or discovered apps, I would say, right? All those apps which are falling under this 33,000 apps, right, are basically monitored and data is captured over here. For example, if I'm using Google Chrome, right, or content management, anything on Bing, and let's say all the major things. Let me see if I can. Okay, there I will not. Here I have not accessed WhatsApp. That's why it is not there. But if I go to Cloud App Catalog, whatever is available in our Cloud App Catalog, all these things can be monitored on a Defender, managed endpoint. So let me search for WhatsApp. Yeah, as you can see, all these details, right? If I go to, let me see if I can get Signal as well. So yeah, if you are using a device which is endpoint protected, you can always hope that answers. So obviously, I mean, if it is not empty, right, then there's nothing you can do on the endpoint because your endpoint has to be managed. So then that case, ideally, you should protect your devices or protect your cloud apps, right? Which are kind of either to your firewall or basically look at the devices and just put conditional access policies to make sure that they're only accessible from corporate devices, right? So you have to have a license properly to protect it with MDE and MCAS. That's where it works better, right? Hope that answers your question. But thank you for the questions. That's were really great questions. All right. Any other questions? All right. If there are no other questions, so what I would like to do is kind of conclude the session here, and with the thank you for everyone. And then always you can reach out to Bignesh and me for any questions you have. We'll be happy to help. And then we'll be announcing our Defender for Cloud app session 2 shortly to you all. So with that said, thank you once again, everyone, for taking out your time on a weekend, and hope to see you soon, and wish you happy learning.